Greetings. Welcome to another of our Wednesday webinars at Westchester. Today's webinar features three well-respected leaders in music education or in education in general, who will be sharing ideas with our future educators at Westchester University as they navigate through their pre-professional lives and are prepared to enter what is becoming a very uncertain job market. I'd like to welcome our three guests. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. Just give us a little bit of background as to who you are, and yeah, and then we'll get the chat rolling. So we'll start with Mrs. Gumbel.
Thanks. My name is Kelly Gumbel, and I am an elementary band director in the Hempfield School District in Landisville, Pennsylvania. I am also one of three music department co-coordinators at Hempfield and a proud RAM alum. Rams up.
Great. And Mr. Snyder?
All right. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Craig Snyder. I'm the director of bands at Penncrest High School. I'm in my 28th year of teaching. Taught at elementary, middle school, junior high, and high school levels. I've taught general music and band. And I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come out today. And I want to thank Professor Gumbel for putting this panel together. I think this is something that's super important and not something that gets covered in depth enough, I think, at this stage in your preparation. So I'm really excited to be part of this next hour. Me and Calvin and Hobbs, we're really happy to be here.
Yeah, and if the tiger gets loose, just scream real loud. All right, you can unmute if that happens. So and Dr. Adams.
Yes, my name's Chris Adams. Good afternoon. Until January of 2019, I had been the superintendent of the Hempfield School District in Lancaster County. In January of 19, I actually retired after 35 years as a public school educator. I'd spent 13 years as a science teacher in New York State and in Pennsylvania, working with middle school and high school students predominantly. I then did 11 years as a building administrator, assistant principal, and then middle school principal, a high school principalship, and then I did 11 years as a district office administrator, it was 7 as an assistant superintendent, and then the last 4 as superintendent. So I've worked at 3 different school systems, worked in a lot of different roles, did a lot of extracurricular work over the course of my time. And for the last year or so, I've been doing some executive and leadership coaching, working with teams of people, trying to help them build the kinds of cultures that are great for their organizations and the people they serve. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for coming. Obviously, we've got, a wide array of experiences here, but what everybody has in common, everybody on this panel has in common is we've all interviewed for jobs. We've all been in your shoes as students, preparing to enter into what can be a very confusing time. And we've also been on the other side of the table, and that's what we titled this session here today, the other side of the table, and trying to demystify some things, give you some perspectives that maybe you haven't thought of yet. And hopefully this can be of value to folks that are preparing to enter the job market now. I see several folks who are student teaching or would be student teaching at this point who are already entering into the prospects of the search. And then there are also people here who are in their first year at Westchester University who might not have this on the radar screen, but you can start to think about the sorts of things that you can be doing for yourself as you move through your studies to ensure that you can be successful as you enter into the job market in a few years. So, Dr. Adams, we'll start with you. Maybe some things that folks haven't thought about. I'd love to hear what the job posting is like internally. So, what does the process look like? If you could walk us through maybe what sorts of things are happening in a school system prior to the job is posted, and then what happens once the job is posted, right?
Sure.
Application receipt, those sorts of things. So
absolutely.
The floor is yours.
Okay, great. So it really begins, the process begins when a position opens up, when a vacancy comes up. When that happens, somebody in the HR department, either the coordinator or a specialist, is going to get put heads together with the head of the department where the vacancy lies, and oftentimes the building administrator, a principal or an assistant principal. So there'll be 2 or 3 people that'll sit down and they'll look at the job description for the role to make sure that the essential job functions associated with the role have not changed since the last time the position came open. They'll update that job description as they need to, and then they'll start to talk about what kind of background, attributes, experiences, educational qualities they're going to look for in the candidates when they post. They're going to determine what their non-negotiables are and then what some preferences might be, but won't be deal breakers as they begin thinking about how they're going to screen applicants. So they'll work on those pieces, decide what aspects of the role they want to highlight in the posting, and then they're going to put that posting up. Generally, it's going to go up on the district website. That's going to be your best resource as a candidate for jobs, is to go to a district's website. Go to their HR site and go to where they have job postings or vacancies. Typically, what we are going to do on our end from a district standpoint, we're going to highlight the essential qualities that we're looking for in a new hire. And then, we're also then going to highlight what we think makes the position attractive, maybe some things that make the school system or the district or the community attractive. That's becoming increasingly important for school systems, given the fact that there just aren't that many, not certainly as many people coming out of the teacher colleges with teaching credentials. So there's a little more competition out there amongst districts for the talent. One of the things that candidates should be looking for is clarity in terms of what it is they need to submit and by when, and when the submission portals open up for the materials that need to be sent. At that point, they'll post. As soon as they start receiving posts, most people that I know in districts, they're going to require anything that's submitted to be done online. There's going to be uploads of materials, given that I think our students are becoming more and more savvy, given learning management systems, how to do that. That's not going to be the issue that maybe it was 5, even 10 years ago. My advice to candidates is simply follow the directions that are provided by the district. Don't provide any more, don't provide any less, and do what you can to get the material in early. And before you do that, please proofread your material, have somebody else proofread it, particularly if you're going to be competing with dozens of other potential candidates, which is likely in the top school systems. Little things make a difference, and you don't want to see your stuff screened out because your material's not clean, or it's sloppy, or there's misspellings, or you've not provided the materials that have been requested. I really encourage, get it in early, because most districts, if they have a review team, they're going to start looking at the material as soon as they receive it. Most of the time, they're not going to wait right up to the deadline. So if you get your stuff in early, it's more likely they're going to be able to spend more time on it than if yours is somewhere in the middle of a stack of 20 or 30 and they're going to be screening quick. So get your stuff in early. From that standpoint, the next kind of things that the review team, usually, like I said, 2 or 3 people, they're going to review the applications. They're going to screen out things that are incomplete, or where there's a lot of erroneous kinds of things. And then they're going to start to look for the things that they value. For instance, what we looked for in the materials, what kind of learner have you been through your career? You can start to get a sense of that from transcripts and the way they write, the way they present the materials. In what ways have you kind of challenged yourself or been resilient? You can kind of see those things in transcripts. And if there's any essay components to the applications, what makes you think that they care deeply about kids and will connect with them professionally and will invest themselves fully in kids' growth? That's a huge thing, at least from my perspective, that we look for when we start to screen. What evidence suggests you possess knowledge, skills, attitude that you need to facilitate learning have the aptitude, desire to learn how to continue to do that over time, and increasingly technology and online learning background. What kind of evidence is there that you're going to be able to function not only in a face-to-face environment, but if need calls for it, as we're living now, either a blended or a totally virtual kind of a deal. Once they've screened the applicants, there's going to be calls for interviews. Someone from the HR department in larger districts, or maybe somebody at the district office in a smaller district, is going to call. They're going to reach out. They're going to provide you some information. As the person seeking the job, you want to make yourself accessible, make it easy for the district. Don't make it hard for the district to get you in. And then make sure in that conversation where they're extending an offer for an interview that you're clear about where you've got to report, when you've got to be there, what you need to bring with you that the district might not already have, who's going to be participating in the interview. Get a sense. If it's one person, two people, three people, try and get at least the roles, if not the names, and whether or not the interview is going to be a face-to-face experience or whether it's going to be done virtually via phone or video conference. So those are all kinds of details that kind of go on behind the scenes as a district gets ready to open a vacancy and then try and fill it.
That's outstanding. And that's a lot of insight that we wouldn't otherwise have. So the students that are here in the chat, you know, they don't see what's going on behind the scenes. And there are a couple of questions that have popped up already that I think might be worth addressing now. Nicole just asked, and I see Craig responded to this. If a teacher's retirement is well known, what would be holding up the application from being posted? Or what, I think Nicole is saying, what would prevent the posting from going up right away? And Craig said, the internal posting, which allows for transfer. So there might be people in the department that would be interested in moving. And Chris, I don't know, before we move on to Craig, would you have any other comments?
Yeah, depending on, at the district level, there's going to be budget conversations that are going on beginning usually November, December, right into February, March, April, and that 3-month time frame. The district's going to be doing an environmental scan to determine whether or not they can actually replace the positions that are coming open due to retirement. There was a point in the early 2011, 2012 when the federal stimulus dollars had dried up, and I know Hempfield, we had to close a $6.5 million budget gap in a single year. And so there were positions we did not fill. So a district's got to determine whether or not it's going to be in a position to actually fill the position that's coming open. And then, as Craig indicated, they'll typically look to see if there are any internal transfer possibilities that need to be explored before they look externally.
So as applications are coming in, and I really like how Dr. Adams made the point to say multiple times, you have to be detail-oriented with all of this. You really can't be presenting materials that are incomplete. You can't be presenting materials that are sloppily put together. This is your first impression that you're making, and it needs to be on point in every way. So Craig, as somebody who's gone through, been part of these kind of screening teams, an application or an applicant, what are the kinds of things that stand out to you as you're looking at these, and whether it's maybe even from a musical standpoint, what are the kinds of things that make somebody jump out at you?
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying it's not what you might think. But I also want to say that Dr. Adams nailed a number of points that I was going to make about this too. A couple of things that I can really agree with. Again, being on panels before, and also, I've been through job interviews myself, sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully. One of the things I think I want to highlight from just talking about how to get, how to find out where the jobs are, you will be shocked at how quickly the window closes for applications for these school districts. So you really need to stay on those school district websites. You have to be very active. You have to be very aggressive about checking those things daily. And when you see something pop up, you don't have a lot of time to hem and haw and think about it. You definitely want to do your research and make a decision before you throw your hat in the ring, but you don't want to miss that window. And another thing that you could do is you can even start this now, even if you're a freshman. Work on expanding your network. Get together with the other music ed undergrads, student teachers, your professors, find out what's going on, talk about what your co-ops were talking about if you're student teaching. Be nosy about the job situation in your own district and in districts around you, and share that information with each other. This isn't one of those businesses where it's about who you know as much as it is when you find things out. And you want to make sure that you are, like Dr. Adams said, available when that information hits. You want to create avenues for jobs to find you. So think about how they're going to find you. And the number one way for you to do that is through networking, through social media, through your hustle, through your aggressiveness, and through being able to be referred by somebody. So just keep some of those things in mind as you're going through your job searches. But yeah, as far as the application is considered, I've been in these screening situations before. I've gone through the stack of applications, and then I've been in the room for the first and the second rounds of interviews. I can tell you from my experience, everyone has a stellar GPA. Everyone is volunteered all over the place. Everyone played in their top ensembles. Everyone has won some sort of scholarship and recognition, and everyone has 3 glowing letters of recommendation. So you have to think about what's going to make you stand apart in addition to having all of those things to be competitive in a competitive situation. When I'm sitting there looking through applications, my first pass through the stack is frankly to make my job easier by eliminating the applications that are either substandard or irrelevant. So if I run across a disorganized or poorly formatted resume, that gets the boot. What you want to do, and you want to do this early before you need it, as you start to form your resume and update it and your cover letter, have somebody who knows what they're doing take a look at it. Even if you pay a professional to put it together for you, and those services are out there, that could really pay off in the long run. Cover letters, resumes, applications that have grammatical and spelling errors, they get the boot. Like Dr. Adams said, if you're not giving the material or the information that was asked of you, or if you're giving material that you weren't asked of, sometimes that can be a negative against you. So one of the things you can do, make sure you have somebody proofread that cover letter. Don't worry about things like fancy paper or colors or graphics. Please don't go on Microsoft Word and get like the first template for resumes and just kind of cut and paste to put all your stuff in there. That doesn't impress me. I don't think it impresses a whole lot of people. If you have a professional headshot, that's not a bad thing to put on a page 1 of a resume. Maybe just something up in the right-hand corner, not too big, just so we kind of can put a face to a name. That's not a bad way of getting yourself to stand out. Not a lot of people do that. Another piece of advice I would have for you is tailor your documents. Tailor all your documents to the specific job that you're applying for. If after your name and your contact information on your resume, your objective statement says full-time position in K-12 music education, and I'm looking for a middle school band director, you're already not keeping up with the people that have said, I'm specifically looking to teach middle school band. So it doesn't take a whole lot of time to retype that and print out a new one, and I would suggest that you take that time to do that. It's just a nice detail. What else? Keep your resume clean in terms of its format. I like to see something with lots of space. I like it to be easy for me to find the information that I need. I like to see a very clearly organized structure, whether it's chronologically forwards or backwards or by subject or topic. I want to be able to find that information and highlight your accomplishments, the things that you do feel like will make you stand out of the crowd. Make sure they pop out for me. And what would those things be? For me, leadership is huge. I'd like to see leadership experience in specifically what you were expected to do and what you accomplished in those positions. Job experience, I think, is something that can make you stand out, especially if you're competing against other people just coming out of their undergrads and everybody's kind of on the starting line. If you have already been volunteering with people's programs, if you've been teching with their bands, working summer music camps, teaching private lessons, that professional experience, I think, is something that I like to see. Professional performance experience, that ranks behind it. It can be, if it's significant, it can catch my eye. but I don't necessarily prioritize that. You want to make sure you are thinking of yourself as an educator and that you're always thinking about what is your why. Okay, why are you a music educator? And you know, you're in a lot of ensembles right now, you're practicing, you're taking your lessons, but there's going to be a shift where it's got to be focused on teaching other people to do those things you're learning how to do now. And that needs to be part of your why. If that comes across to me, then that also gets me interested in you. Lastly, please remember that your resume only gets you an invitation. It only gives you an opportunity. What you do with it will come out when you are live in the room, either whether you're sitting at the table for your first round job interview, or if you're in a second round, which often involves some sort of demo lesson or teaching live people. That's really where you're going to get the gig. But this will get you in the door. So you definitely want to try to keep that as clean as you can.
That's fantastic material, Craig. We really appreciate you you sharing all that with us. And I don't know,
Sure.
Dr. Adams or Mrs. Gumbel, do you have anything to add to that?
No,
No, I have nothing else to add. Sorry, I'm good.
yeah, no, I think Craig did a great job. The three words that come to mind for me: the materials need to be clean. He hit the nail on the head. You want your materials to be very readable, easily scanned, and with using highlights, bolds, italics, anything that you want to pop, to do something that makes it stand out in the formatting, but make sure it's something that can be easily scanned. And so clean, compelling, and professional. Those are the three words I would leave you with.
As a quick follow-up here, a question that comes up a lot. I'm fortunate that I do have a lot of students coming to me with resume, and they're asking for proofreading and suggestions on how they could make a better presentation and a better impact. And I love that. I embrace the fact that people are reaching out. Oftentimes, there's a question. One of the first questions is about the length of the resume, and there is a difference of I don't know. At some point, somebody has said it needs to be 1 page long. And then somebody else has said it can only be 2 pages long. And then somebody else has said, so I don't know, where do you, I know what my philosophy is on this, but I'm curious to hear from you folks. Do you have any, are you throwing any of these resumes in the trash if they're longer than 2 pages?
I'll go. I wouldn't throw it in the trash, but I'm already annoyed with you. I think a front and a back is fine. And if you can't tell me what I need to know in that, front back format, along with your cover letter, along with an application, which sometimes can be pages long once it gets printed out from the website. Yeah, I've got a lot of paperwork to go through that day. And plus I'm still teaching my classes that day. So I'd really appreciate just a 2-pager.
2-pager, okay.
I think tagging on to that, I think sticking with making sure that it's clear and readable and easy to find the information that you're looking for, make sure the formatting is right. And like Craig said, the spacing is there. So, front and back is great, but make sure that it's clear and easy to find the information that we're looking for. Don't try to cram everything you've ever done onto 2 pages either.
Yeah, for entry-level teaching positions, 2 sides of a sheet of paper ought to be enough. As you look to more involved positions, you get deeper into leadership during your career, you start looking at principal positions or supervisor roles, your resume is going to become more of a vita. And it may become longer because you'll have more experiences, relevant experience under your belt that might cause it to bleed on the multiple pages. For an entry-level position coming out of school, 2 pages, 2 sides, clean, with real good flow should be fine.
So once you've sorted through the applications and now you have a pool of candidates to be communicating with for a first round interview, what sort of recommendations would you make to our students as they're preparing to sit down at the table for the first time? And we'll start with Mrs. Gumbel.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for me is that there's no replacement for experience. And I think putting yourself in the position of having as much experience to draw on as an educator is really critically important. the more activities you can do right now to get yourself working with students. You know, Mr. Gumbel said something earlier about the music service learning opportunities right now for, you know, private lessons and master classes and those kinds of things. The more you can do with students prior to getting into that room, the more you're going to have to draw on to answer the questions that come up. Sorry, the first appearance. But going along with experience being the best teacher, the other side of that is giving yourself some experience. There you go. Answering interview questions. If you go onto the NAFME website, there's a great resource there that's like the 100 or 105 most frequent or interview questions that could come up in your experience, and getting yourself experience answering those questions, and sit down with that list and kind of sketch out some answers and some things so that you have a framework of where, you know, where you stand. And then actually sitting with peers and sitting with mentors and physically answering those questions and having to go through that process, just to give yourself some experience in having to come up with those thoughts on the spot. And going along with that, kind of sitting down and writing out, what is your philosophy of education? At some point in your college career, you've had to write that out somewhere in methods or somewhere else. And thinking about, you know, that list of interview questions, where does that all come back to your philosophy of education, and making sure that you can clearly draw on that. And how is that going to impact students? You know, make as many of those answers to those questions student-centered as possible. That's what this is all about. You know, that's why we're all here. So as much as you can bring that back to how you're going to work with students and what you want to do with them. Another interview prep that I think is really important is studying the district and studying the program for which you're interviewing. As much information as you can get. You can go on any district's website and find their mission statement. What do they value? What do they see as important? And how can you bring your experience to that mission? I know any relevant history, if you're interviewing for a high school band job and you're going to be teaching that marching band, you're going to want information on the history of that program or things that they've done, so that you can reference things that are of value to that program. So I think that's critically important. And along those lines, you're going to have an opportunity in an interview to ask questions as well. So to draw on both your experience and your knowledge of the program, that's going to put you in a better position to ask the right questions and give yourself more information as well. And some other things in preparing for an interview, you know, it seems like it should go without saying, but make sure you're presentable. Make sure that you're dressed professionally. Make sure that you have relevant materials at your disposal. You know, I have had candidates come in with a small packet of information that they thought was valuable for us to have. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, if you're interviewing for a band job, you don't want to come in with all your instruments and be ready for anything, but you want to have what you think may be relevant for the position for which you're interviewing. You want to be early. You want to make sure that you're there, you're ready to go, you're settled down. There will be nerves, for sure. No matter how much experience you've had, there are going to be nerves. So, you know, put yourself in a position where you can get there, you can sit, you can relax, you can kind of go through some mental prep and focus yourself before that interview takes place. And the last thing I want to say, and I think this might be for me the thing that's most important, is just be yourself in that interview. There is nothing more difficult for me than sitting across the table from someone who's trying to play the part of a middle school band director, rather than taking their values and being themselves and trying to kind of craft that into fitting that role, rather than, you know, giving the answers that they think we want to hear. Give the answers that you know, come to your core as an educator, and that will set you up much better.
Yeah, that's all great. A couple of follow-ups, just piggybacking on some of those ideas. Those NAFME 100 most frequently asked questions in a music interview, they're gold. And I used to make all of my student teachers who were with me write out their answers for every single one of those. And it seems like an insane kind of request, but I think you learn a lot about yourself. If you haven't been in tune with that educational philosophy in a while, make sure you review it, because that's something that is constantly evolving. That doesn't get put in a museum somewhere. That's a living, breathing set of core values, right? That are constantly shifting and being shaped by your environment. So make sure you review that. And Mrs. Gumbel said there's no substitute for teaching experience. There's no substitute for interview experience either. The most awkward situation that I was ever in was one I remember very clearly, preparing for my first job interview at Phoenixville High School. And I remember Dr. Yozviak inviting me over to just go over some basic interviewing techniques. And I walked through the door and I thought we were going to hang out and just kind of shoot the breeze and go over some things. And it was a straight up job interview. He made me sit there and he asked me questions, and he didn't accept when I was like, oh man, come on. He was like, no, you're going to answer these questions because you need to be able to answer these questions. So get somebody in your life, whoever it is, who's going to sit down and be real with you and go through that interview process. It's absolutely invaluable, right? Okay, so yeah, Craig, as folks come into the room, they're well presented. They've got their interview. They're prepared for the interview, but now they're in the room. Mrs. Gumbel said that they're going to be nervous, and I think that's very true. But what makes a candidate stand out in the room? What are the kinds of things that you're looking for?
Well, first of all, there's a couple different rooms and different kinds of rooms. So, usually if you're going to get hired by a school district around here, you're going to go through usually two, but at least 2 rounds of interviews. So do you want me to talk about kind of a little bit of both here? Or I guess we can start with like the table interview, right?
Yeah, let's start there for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I liked everything that Kelly just said. Make sure you're taking notes on that, because that was all great. Walk into the room like you own it. Look people in the eye. Learn how to shake hands. Okay, learn how to actually press the webbing of the flesh. Obviously, not until we're told we're allowed to shake hands again. But right now, you can practice that. And when you are given names of the people on the panel, repeat them, and then try to use them again during the question and answer process. If I'm, there's usually going to be a number of people around the table, maybe 4, we'll just come up with a number for right now. And they'll all take turns asking these questions that are standardized on a form. And, as you come around the second time, it's kind of impressive to me if you remember who I was the very first time. Now you have taken that step, like I talked about earlier, to get you to stand out, because out of the 10 people we're going to talk to that day, 2 or 3 of them are going to do that. So you're already kind of separating yourself by being able to do things like that. These questions that you're going to be asked, don't expect them to be off of the NAFME list. Right? Your HR directors are going to be devising these questions. Principals are going to have input. Other admin are going to have input. Dr. Adams, I don't know if you had input in devising the first round interview questions, but a lot of them are going to be not directly music related. They'll be related to education. So you need to make sure you're prepared to answer questions about special education. You might be given what if scenarios. If something happens in your classroom, how would you respond? How are you going to communicate with parents? Trying to think about things that have been on lists before. But you don't want to get thrown by questions like that, because those are the things early on that are going to be asked. And then there might be a few music questions in that first round, or there might be some follow-up questions where you can be more specific to it. So the reason I bring that up is just first, so you're kind of ready for that, but also keep in mind that there are things that you want them to know about you by the time you leave that room, and you have about a half hour to get them to know it. These 10 questions that you're going to be asked are your vehicles to get that information across, but it might not always be the easiest way for you to segue into the things that you want to hear. So one of the things you can get good at is, answer the question, but also make sure by the time you left that room that you got the talking points in that you needed to say about yourself that, again, are going to allow me to remember you and make you stand out from the other candidates. So don't be handcuffed by the questions that are being asked. You definitely want to answer them. It'll become very obvious very quickly if you're dodging or you're off topic, but make sure you use those opportunities to also say what you want to say when you get in there. What else? Speak clearly and maturely when you're being asked questions. I once stopped listening to a candidate during a job interview because she enunciated like a 10-year-old. Like if the word is button, don't say button, and don't keep saying the word like. You have these verbal pauses that are natural in your conversation, especially your social conversation. Speaking to professionals in a professional situation is very different. So identify for yourself the verbal pauses. Since Adam told a story, I'll tell one. That's one of the things that I do with my student teachers. It's a day. It's called the verbal pause day, where instead of me watching the student teacher actually instruct, I'm sitting there tallying the okays, the all rights, the likes, the ums, and I give that to that person at the end of that lesson, and they're devastated because nobody has any idea what their verbal pauses are until they actually go through that as a process. The second time we do it, those are all vastly improved. I would recommend you do that for yourself before you go into a professional interview situation. So I think that might work out. While I'm interviewing people and I'm answering or asking these questions on this piece of paper that I have to ask, in the back of my mind, the band director me is thinking, do I want to work with this person every day as a colleague? And the dad in me is thinking, would I want my kids to have you as a teacher? So while you are answering these questions, what is going to come across, maybe even a little bit louder, is your passion, your enthusiasm, and how much you care about what you do. So make sure that that's obvious to us at the table. I think that's also something that can get you to stand apart a little bit. It's also something that tends to go away depending on the level of the nerves. So if you're able to do that, it's also going to make you feel more comfortable because you'll be speaking from your heart and not your head. And your heart doesn't get nervous, your head gets nervous. So that's something that you can think about making sure that we know at the table by the time you leave us. Dr. Tim taught me this. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So again, make me feel your passion for what you do. Make sure I know what your why is and get me excited about you being a teacher in my district. And I'll close with this because Kelly already said this and it was terrific. You're interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. I noticed a question came up in the chat. Well, what if I really don't want that middle school band job, but I'm going to go take that interview? Well, that's going to reveal itself at some point in the process, I think, unless you're really good at fooling me. You want to really make sure that that you are comfortable with what you would be asked to do potentially for the next 30 to 40 years. So make sure that when at the end of the questions, the standard questions are asked, when they ask you, do you have any questions for us, that you got some questions for us. Because if you don't have questions for us at the end of that process, you come across as uninterested in the position. Those are my thoughts on that. Mr. Gumbel, where would you like to go next with it?
No, that's great. No, I'm going to because I've been in upper level interviews with Dr. Adams myself, and it's I want to get his thoughts on not just what gets a candidate to stand out, but then also just kind of the post-interview walkthrough, much like you gave us the pre-interview walkthrough, just kind of what's behind the curtain, what's going on after a candidate leaves the room and so on and so forth. So Dr. Adams.
Yeah, well, first let me say, I thought Kelly and Craig, you guys killed it. You guys really nice deep insights in terms of getting ready for the interview process and then what actually happens. And I think the real key to that first round interview, and Craig hit the nail on the head, I sitting there, I'm going to try and put on different hats. I want to know as a parent, do I want you working with my child? And as a colleague, do I want to work with this person? This is somebody that I want to sit side by side with and get in a foxhole with and do education for a period of time, because there are challenges to what we do in school systems. And are you the kind of person that I think is going to be resilient, that's going to bring something to the table, is going to be a contribution to our department and to our school, and is there for the right reasons. And the very first question you ought to be preparing for in any interview is, what is it? Why do you want to work with students? Why is it that you want to work with kids? What is it about that prospect that nourishes your soul? And be prepared, if you can, to offer some examples as to why that is. And so, Kelly, your point about getting some experience now, working with children, doing the kinds of things that are natural stepping stones to becoming a teacher in the classroom. So, that in a first round interview, that's really about your character. What kind of human being are you? Do you have the basics that I'm looking for? Are you a learner? Have you demonstrated ability to learn? Do I believe you're going to be able to facilitate the learning of others? Because at the end of the day, I really don't care what you know. If you're not in a position, or you're not able to get students to a place where they know, understand, and are able to do things that they were not able to do before experiencing you, then how intelligent you are, or your GPA, or what really isn't all that valuable to us. The value lies in how you're able to grow students, how you're able to contribute to the growth and the achievement of others, whether it's students or your colleagues, the department, school, and what you contribute to the community. So post-interview, some things, and Craig started to hit on these. As that initial interview comes to a close, you will likely get the chance to ask one or two questions. One of the things that you would likely want to ask, because it says something about you, is what kind of opportunities are there for me to be involved with kids, or to get involved with the school outside of my classroom role. There are things you're going to be expected to do as a classroom teacher. There are things administrators hope you want to do in an extracurricular sense, that you want to be involved with kids outside the classroom. That says something about you. So that's a question that you want to have in your arsenal. If they've not asked you about it, it's something you want to inquire about and think about. How is it that I want to contribute outside of my role as a teacher during the school day? Another piece is to ask them if they don't share, and oftentimes the HR director or whoever the HR representative is in the interview, they will indicate what the next steps look like. But if they do not, for some reason, ask, what are the next steps in your process? When can I expect to hear? From whom will I hear? And what your timeline is. So try and get some clarity around that. So, because if you don't, you're going to go away from the interview wondering, and each day that goes by and you don't hear something, it's just going to ratchet up your level of anxiety, especially if coming out of the interview, you figured out that this is a really nice fit for me and I'd like to have this job. Third piece coming out of that interview, and Craig hit this too, you want to make sure that if you're not able to work in certain things that you want that team to know about yourself, you're not going to get the opportunity to ask more than 2 or 3 questions. I've given you 2. The third thing I would say is, if they didn't ask you a question that you have something you wanted to share about yourself that you think it's important for them to know, that's how you want to conclude the interview. Just put it out there and say, hey, I really appreciate the time. One thing I wasn't asked about that I think is important for you to know about me, and then share it. And make sure you don't ramble, because their time is valuable. And so the more preparation you can do going into the interview, so that you have your talking points and you've tried to anticipate the kind of questions you're going to be asked, you can then be concise, to the point, share good examples that are specific to what they've asked you. So after that, so the interview's finished. Hopefully you feel good and you're going to prepare for what you hope is a subsequent interview, a call back. You want to reflect on that initial interview. You want to think about the questions you were asked, how you answered them, what you wish you had maybe given more of, shared less of, maybe provided differently. Just go back and relive the experience, what you did well, what you may have missed, so that if there are things that you'd like to work into the next interview, if given the chance, you're able to do so. Craig's already alluded to it. It's likely in that next round interview, you're going to be asked to do something of a performance nature. They're going to want to see if you can walk your talk. One of the things we used to do, don't know if Hempfield's still doing it, but you'd come for a second interview as a teacher, and you'd be given a half an hour to put together a quick lesson plan. We'd give you materials, we'd give you a topic, and you'd be asked to, on the spot, put together a quick lesson plan that you would then have to walk us through at some point in that second interview so that we could see whether or not you could walk your talk. In an area like music, phys ed, some of the more performance-oriented kind of subjects, it's likely that they're going to ask you to actually either conduct an ensemble, conduct a lesson with some students, and they're going to actually get to see you practice what you've preached in the interview to see if what you really are about. What you see is what you get is the way I always put it. Because there are some people that we've come across in interview situations that can talk a good game, but their performance doesn't always match up to to what they're able to talk about in the interview setting. So yeah, those are the kinds of things. Maybe put together 3 to 5 artifacts that you could leave with that second interview team. I've seen kids show up in interviews and pass around the 4 or 5 inch thick binder with all the things they did in their college career. And that's all well and good. But the thing is, unless you're prepared to leave it and then come back and pick it up at some other time, I don't know that they always are done the justice by the interview team that you'd like them to as the candidate. So if there are 3 or 5 things that you could leave with no expectation that they need to be retrieved, that the team can keep them, that are really good, provide a really good window into who you are as a human, who you want to be as an educator, what it is you want to be or aspire to do with kids, and any evidence of things that you've already done in your student teaching or other kinds of experiences that point to not only do I want to do it, but I've already started to do these kinds of things. Leave those kind of artifacts. Think about what those might look like and be. And have those ready to share and leave in that second interview. And just understand that once these processes start, the processes are going to clip along. There's typically not going to be more than 7 to 10 days between steps, between the first round interview and the second interview, or a second interview and some kind of a callback. And so preparation all the preparation you can do on the front end makes a difference. Chance favors the prepared mind is a statement I kind of favor. And then one other thing that you might want to look at, as much as you can glean from the website about who's going to be interviewing you, what you can learn about the school, taking some time, if you're close enough, to drive around the community so you can get a sense of the context of where your students live and what seems to be important based on what you can just glean from the community. But maybe ask if you can see, or does the district have a copy of the collective bargaining agreement posted? Especially if you get through the second round interview, you still feel really good about things, and they're telling you there may be a third round. You may have questions that you could start to answer for yourself because many districts will post their collective bargaining agreement, so you can learn about salaries, starting salaries, what some of the benefits are, enough so that you can at least ask questions if you see things that you don't understand, which you very well may come across things that are not obvious to you as someone just coming out of school. Things like about their tuition reimbursement policies and those kinds of things. So I think that's enough from that piece. So Craig, Kelly.
No, I mean, that's a lot of information from all 3 of you. That's incredibly valuable for our students, for sure. So let's say, and we're running a little short on time, so we're gonna accelerate through these next few questions because I think they are very important. You get the call, and somebody is offering you a job, right? Everything has gone well. You get that call. Somebody says, "Congratulations, we'd like to offer you this position." Boy, is that an exciting time. But there's also all kinds of emotions, different emotions that maybe you weren't expecting, that are going to be rushing through you, and your mind's going to be racing a million miles a minute. Kelly, can you tell us a little bit, or talk to us about some considerations that you might want to make sure that you're taking into account before you say, yeah, I'll do it?
Yeah, I think, you're going to get a phone call and someone's going to tell you that they want to pay you a lot of money to teach. And that's pretty awesome. So, I mean, first things first, be excited, say thank you, be gracious, and then ask for a little bit of time to think about it. It's I think very important that you don't just say yes, of course, let's do it, before you have a little bit more time to process that. So you say thank you, you ask for a day or two to think about it, and then you go straight to your core team of supporters. You need to go to your family, you need to go to your mentors, and you need to really talk some things out and make sure that this is the right decision for you. Every little detail is important. Where's the location of the school? Is that somewhere you're comfortable living or commuting to from wherever you are? Is the salary one that can support your way of life? Can you live off of what you're being offered? What is your quality of life going to be like with this job? Let's say, you just got a high school band job and now you're going to be a marching band director and a jazz band director, and you're going to have all of these things. What else are you doing right now that there may not be time for if you accept this position? And are you willing to kind of shift your priorities and give up some of those things in order to have this new professional life? Build kind of a calendar. What do things look like? What does your schedule look like if you accept this job? And really make honest assessments about what that looks like for you, and using those core people in your life to help you kind of be honest about that. And the job market is what it is at any given point. Sometimes it's fruitful and sometimes it's a little more barren, and that has to be kind of part of the consideration as well. If this is not something I'm comfortable with and I'm going to decline this offer, what kind of risk is that? Is there a good chance of me being able to find something that's a better fit? Or should I be more practical and accept something with the idea that I'm going to get good relevant experience here, and maybe a year or two or three down the line, if I'm not comfortable, I can always change gears. But I think it's really critical to involve as many of the people in your life that are important to you in helping you come to the most honest assessment of where you are with that, and whether or not it's going to be the right move for you.
I would just go back to real quickly about that second round interview Dr. Adams mentioned. That is when you go to perform. I can tell you from being on the panel, I was only very mildly interested in you in that first round, sitting at a table answering questions, because that's not what we do for a living. When I see you up in front of the kids, I am all in and I am watching you like a hawk. I'm noticing everything that's going on. And I want to see those kids engaged and enraptured. And I'm a music teacher on the panel. Most of the people on the panel in the second round won't be music teachers. You're going to have principals and assistant principals and maybe assistant superintendents, HR director. Not all of them are going to have music degrees. What are they going to pick up on? They're going to pick up on whether those kids are partying with you that day. I'll be able to judge the content. I'll be able to tell whether you taught a lesson correctly. But what they're going to pick up on is the vibe in the room and just the way everything felt. So that's something that's really important, that your people skills will come across in that second round. And in my personal opinion, that's when you either get that job or you don't. That when I walk out of that second round, my mind's usually made up, or I have it down to one or two people.
Yeah, absolutely right.
So there are a couple of questions that have popped up. We're going to snag a couple of these before we have everybody give their parting thoughts and your parting wisdom to these students. I know there was one that's been seconded. I think I believe the gist of the question was, oh, there it is. Morgan asked, is there any indication of what school districts are doing to mimic the teaching portion of round two, now that we are not in a position where we're going to be able to get together and teach that lesson? Would that look like an online lesson? Would that, I don't know if any of you have been asked that question or have heard anything. What are your thoughts?
I don't have any practical answer for that other than I know that the first rounds in many cases are being handled either over the phone or through video conferencing. You know, I can't say for sure. It's possible that it might be a Zoom lesson. It's possible that it might be, you know, something entirely different, or performance. I can't say. I don't know, Craig, if you guys have any plans for this, but at this point, at least through our HR or anything, we don't have any further indication right now.
Yeah, we're all still so early in this process of, you know, being together apart, that there are so many things that they're on the list to talk about, but they're so far down the list right now. And the state keeps changing the list on us, and, you know, Mother Nature keeps changing the list on us. So it will be interesting to see how, as the summer progresses, if we're allowed to start to gather again, or if we're not, you know, how they are going to assimilate, you know, some kind of lesson.
Darby asked earlier, and I think Dr. Adams, this was after your initial statements. She talked about job descriptions for music teachers being potentially vague, and why. Number one, why would that be? And then number two, how would you go about learning more about that position?
It's a great question. I think job descriptions by their very nature tend to be a little bit vague because it gives the leadership the opportunity to build some things in that, if they're overly specific, you know, depending on the relationship of the district with its union personnel, uh, districts can back themselves into a corner sometimes with the language in their job descriptions. So uh, you also want to make sure that there's enough flexibility that teachers can demonstrate artistry in their work, and in the other direction too. That that the job description doesn't become so formalized and specific that it turns your people into robots, because then you miss the opportunity to capitalize on people's unique gifts and talents. So, I mean, that's a piece of it. And the second part of the question?
The second part was just, where was it? Oh, how would you go about finding clarity?
Oh yeah, I think one of the things that you can do is ask if there's someone, is it possible to have a conversation with the head of the department if there is one designated? Reach out. There's no harm in asking that kind of thing. It demonstrates interest and care, that number one, you've looked at the job description and had enough interest to actually look at what was going to be required in the position, and that you're seeing some things that you would like some more specificity about, because you'd like to be as prepared as you can be when you sit down and come in to answer questions in an interview setting. So is it possible for me to either speak with or reach out to the department head with my questions and get some answers? There's no that's what I do very directly, is ask, and see where that takes you. Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as someone who would receive that question, I would much rather be asked that question than have somebody not apply because they think that they don't know what the job is. I'd, definitely ask the question.
Great. Any other questions from the um excellent advice coming through in the chat, as always, from the Tiger King. All right, so any other questions before we wrap things up? Speak now or just send me an email with another question. Oh, yeah, Darby said, what types of artifacts should we be including? Right, so it was brought a couple times, those 3 to 4 artifacts. Dr. Adams mentioned it. I know Kelly mentioned it earlier. Things, the leave behinds in these kind of settings, not an essential part of the interview, but what kind of artifacts would you be including in those scenarios?
I think for me, I'm looking at something that's relevant to the job for which you're interviewing. If it's in my case, like an elementary band job, I would want to see maybe a sample activity, sample lesson, or some kind of material that you've come up with, or a warm up that you've created to use, or a concert program that you put together. Just something small that shows me you've got relevant experience to the job, for which you're interviewing, and that you've taken the time and care to put something together to show me a little bit more about yourself.
Another possibility would be a piece of exemplary student work, a student that you would work through some form of lesson or activity that Kelly's described, and you can actually share what a student was able to produce as a result of spending time with you. Or a couple of examples is another possibility.
Or it could be an envelope with a crisp $100 bill for everybody involved in the interview. Whatever gets it done. So, all right. Thank you to our esteemed panel here today. Just some parting advice for our future educators as they're preparing to enter into the world. So you just signed your contract and you're heading out into the world. What would you say to these folks? We'll start with Chris.
Okay. Some basic things right off the bat. Ask HR people, hey, particularly if it's going to entail you moving into the area, see if they've got any resource people that you can reach out to, realtors, for instance. Find out if they know who your mentor is going to be. You're going to be assigned a mentor if you're new to the profession and new to the district. You're going to have a mentor. See if you can get the name of that person, or if not, when that person will be assigned. Find out whether or not you can have the contact information for your department head. Reach out to that person and just seek permission to float questions by that individual as they arise, because you're going to be overwhelmed to an extent with all the different things that start to flood your mind in terms of, wow, how do I get ready to go do this? Start to familiarize yourself with the school community. You can do that online to the extent that you're able to get into the community and just immerse yourself in it a little bit, just to get a feel for it. Do that. Being a student observer, listen more than you speak. But when you have the opportunity to contribute, to be of assistance to your colleagues or to the people in your building, take advantage of the opportunity to do that in a humble way. Strive to be a reflective practitioner. As you start to get into your work, periodically step back, take a couple deep breaths, and ask yourself, what am I doing? Why am I doing it this way? Is there a better way to do it? Who could help me? Who can I build as a network of support? Who might I want to ask my administrator that I could go observe, watch them work? Those are perfectly legitimate things for new teachers to do. Be focused on your own growth and continuous improvement. You're going to do a ton of on-the-job learning. No matter what you've learned in your undergraduate experience, you're going to learn tenfold on the job. Be ready for it and be good to yourself. Declare yourself a beginner. Put forth your best effort. Try to do the right things the right ways, meaning you put kids first and you do things professionally, and learn from your mistakes, because they're going to happen. And accept the fact that you are going to be a role model when you're with or around students, when you're with your colleagues, when you're out in the community. You're always teaching somebody something with the way you show up and behave. If you're going to be a public school educator, you're going to live your life in a fishbowl. So it's a reality you need to be able to accept. And then the last two things, celebrate. As Kelly meant, it's a huge, if you get hired to work as a public school educator, that's a tremendous honor. It's a tremendous privilege. And with it comes a lot of obligation. And make sure that you demonstrate gratitude to the people that were involved in the process, that got you hired, and absolutely all those people that helped you prepare along the way to do the work that you aspire to do with children. Be grateful. That's it from me.
Craig? I'm sorry. King?
It's Mr. King. I'm going to go back to just the concept of the network. You are never alone in these situations, and you do not have to reinvent the wheel. You have resources that you can take advantage of. You can start with your own peers. Make sure you join the MEA in your state, because that's going to give you a wealth of information and connections. Continue to reach out to your past teachers, your college professors, as long as you haven't annoyed them. I'm sure they would still like to help you out and work with you. And also, don't forget the fact that it's your first year, and you're not expected to be the best teacher you're ever going to be your first year. You're going to have a lot of failure. You're going to, it's going to be like learning your instrument. right? You play more wrong notes than right notes, but that's just the way it is. And we have to be able to handle that, learn from it, and move forward. I can tell you, if I was able to go back to the students I taught my first year, the thing I would want to say to them is, sorry, I just didn't know what I was doing. I'm so much better now, I promise. But you have to go through that because you have to walk that path just like everybody else. Your undergrad cannot prepare you for everything that you're going to be expected to do as a professional. So don't pressure yourself to think that it's going to be. Just take advantage of the resources that you have and solve issues either as they come up, or if you're really good, you role play them and you see them coming and you have an answer for that before it happens.
And last but certainly not least, Mrs. Gumbel.
It goes back to a lot of the same things Craig was just saying. You got to surround yourself with people that make you better. None of us start as the best teacher we're ever going to be, just like you said, but you need to make sure that the people around you are going to make you better, and they're going to lift you up. There are going to be days that are incredibly frustrating, and you don't want to have people surrounding you that are going to just help you talk it all down, and they think they're, you know, that by commiserating with you and everybody feels terrible, we're all in this together. That's not going to be helpful for you. You need to have people who can uplift you and who can help pull you out of those days. And along the same lines, you know, when those things come up that we just don't know how to deal with, you just have to ask yourself, what is the best thing I can do for my students? You know, and that has to be the core of everything that you do. That's what it's about. We are all here because we're here to serve students. So, you know, if at any point you don't have an answer, ask yourself that question. What's the best thing I can do for my students? And then go from there.
That's great. That's a great way to end. Thank you so much to Mrs. Gumbel, Mr. Snyder, Dr. Adams. Wonderful information here today. Thank you to everybody who came in to today's chat, who asked questions, and hopefully you find value added for yourself as you're moving forward. Remember that we are here to be resources for you throughout this process and every other process that you have going on. You know, we love you guys, and yeah, we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Be well.